Hello, Vibers. If you're interested in understanding how to nurture talent, achieve at a really high level in multiple domains, including at international levels, still maintain the joy of what you're doing and balance it with discipline, you're going to love this interview. Lyndie Leviston is an internationally accomplished flutist. She's also a marathon runner, teacher, former director and organiser of the Australian Flute Festival, firefighter, I love that, wife and mother. Frankly, this lady should be wearing a cape. She's maintained really high achievement levels in these fields while also, importantly, maintaining her sense of joy. She tells us how. Now, this is just a short edit of a full interview that goes for about 45 minutes. I'll put the full interview out on YouTube in the very near future, and I do commend this to everybody. This particular edit goes for about 22 minutes, so it's very, very short, but hand on heart, the full edit will be out really, really shortly. But because she's a flutist, what I'm going to do is first play a 30-second recording that she did for a concert. So enough from me. Let's hear from this amazing superwoman. Wow, it's like she could play the flute for a number of countries, as she has. Lyndie Leviston is the director and coordinator of the Australian Flute Festival. She is an incredibly accomplished woman, flutist, marathon runner, wife, mother. Lyndie, thanks so much.
Firefighter.
Sorry?
Firefighter.
And firefighter.
And firefighter,
Right.
yes.
Oh my gosh. What? Where's the woman's cape? Look, it's so cool that you've come on. I'm really excited about this. Besides having that having musical ability, you are an accomplished runner and you do marathons. And I suspect success in both of these fields is related to discipline, ensuring that you're practicing, training, and prepared. Sometimes doing things to excess can take the love and joy out of it. How do you balance the need to train and practice a lot with not overdoing it so that you don't come to hate what you once loved? Suspect success.
That's such an important question. I did a talk recently on the similarities between being a marathon runner, a Christian, and a musician. And there's so many similarities. And I think that's probably why I enjoy doing all those three things, because certainly all three of them require discipline. And, whether that's regular practicing or whether that's training or whether that's reading your Bible, they all require discipline. And they all require perseverance. So even when times are tough and times are hard and you don't feel like it, it's about getting out and doing that training or getting your Bible out and doing that Bible reading. Or doing that practicing. And, often it's those days when you feel your worst that you have the best run, you have an extremely appropriate Bible reading, or you have a good practice. And so I think perseverance is another one that's at the top of my list. And of course, having support. And again, with all three of these disciplines, you need support. So whether that's a peer running group, which I used to have a group of running friends that I ran with and trained with, or whether it's people at church, a Bible study, and then certainly playing in an orchestra, you have a lot of camaraderie with your fellow musicians. So support is really an important thing too. And then knowledge, when you're trying to better your running times, you're reading running magazines and trying to get different bits of information to try and help you improve. And I think that's what the Bible does for us. It teaches us how to live well, how to live better. And we're constantly learning things. And while music is just one of those professions where you never stop learning, you never stop practicing. I actually don't like to use the word practice. I like to use the word play. I've always really loved music, and so it was always a pleasure for me to play. I've also always loved running, so it's always been a pleasure for me to run, and I've always loved being a Christian. So I guess I'm fortunate in that regard. How do I prevent burnout? Burnout happens. I have had burnout before, um, and I think it's about balance. I tend to get very focused.
Mm,
So when I'm running, it tends to, especially if I'm training for a marathon, it takes up a lot of my life.
mm,
And perhaps something else has to take the back seat.
mhm.
Um, and the same with practicing. If I've got a concert coming up, I won't be able to run as much. So my life sort of has seasons, and my year has seasons where I'm concentrating or focusing more on one thing than another. But yeah, burnout is very real, especially in the ministry. You never really feel like your work is done. And so it's just, again, being disciplined about not taking on too much.
Right. It appears to me, besides discipline, you're channeling a lot of emotion in your life, and it's emotion coming through that makes good music. How do you channel your emotion from your brain and your heart, I suppose, through your fingers and your lips? Like,
Yeah.
how does
Well,
that?
you asked me that question, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it because it's so emotional, right? Um, I mean, I think about so I've got two girls, and when they were little, how I used to use music to change their emotions. So if they were really being grumpy, I used to say, "Let's go to the piano and sing." And then, I'm talking like when they're 1 and 2 years old. And then I'd play sort of happy songs, and without them even knowing it, their mood would be transformed from being really grumpy to being really happy. Now, of course, the opposite can happen as well. I have music that brings me to tears. I have music that, if I'm feeling sad and I want to cry, and I think of Ada Pert's Spiegel im Spiegel, um, if I want to have a good cry, I just need to put that music on and I will feel it's like has a cathartic experience, it just really helps you to get rid of a whole lot of emotion. Mozart for me, I experience joy when I hear his music. I find his music very uplifting. Um, how do you control that emotion? Well, I think you go with the flow. And I think one has to be really careful when you're a performer that the performance isn't about you. It's about sharing something with your audience. So it's to take the focus off yourself and to try and allow your audience to experience joy or sadness or this is why playing in nursing homes and is such a wonderful thing to do, because if you choose your music carefully, it can be really uplifting to the people who are listening to it. So yeah, I think music is such a powerful tool when it comes to emotion. And certainly there were concerts that I got home from where I was absolutely exhausted,
Yeah.
just emotionally drained and exhausted. There were other concerts where I would get home and I couldn't sleep for a few hours. So I'd need to have a glass of wine or just unwind. Everyone would be asleep and I'd arrive and I'd just sit in the lounge for an hour because I was on such a high. Um, so yeah, it's an emotional activity for sure.
Okay, so I mean, there you've indicated that you play in retirement homes,
Yes.
and you're an international level musician. Uh, look,
Why would I do that?
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
no
yeah,
disrespect, but like,
yeah.
what
So
that, that
I
would that would that would be like you're never going to see Mick Jagger there. Well, I mean, you probably would see Mick Jagger at an old person's home now, but
probably be
for completely
surprised.
different reasons.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's such a great practice platform before you get out there on the big stage, just to go and play in front of people, because it's very different standing in your practice room, playing through a piece, to being on stage. You cannot simulate being on stage. You can only experience being on stage by being on stage.
Right.
So You know, you've got a very receptive audience when you play in a retirement village. They just want to enjoy themselves. But as my teacher once said, never, never underestimate your audience. I remember one time I played in an old age home, and an old lady in a wheelchair said to me she used to be a concert pianist. So, you know, don't think you can go there and do a fudge job. Um, it's it's a great opportunity for you to practice performing, and it's a great opportunity for you to share your music with people who just really want to absorb and enjoy it with you.
Wow. Okay. And that's even putting aside the giving back aspect kind of stuff. So,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah. Look, why the flute? Why that
Oh,
instrument over others?
well, truth be told, I actually wanted to learn to play the oboe, but there wasn't an oboe teacher at my school, but there was a flute teacher. So I learned the flute. I had prior to that learned the recorder. So I absolutely love the recorder. I'm very saddened that the recorder has such a bad name. Um, But I grew up next to a German family. My father was very ill when I was growing up, and so I spent a lot of time with them. And I used to go with them to the Lutheran church.
Mhm.
And on a Saturday, you just all used to pile in. They'd give you a recorder, and they would have these massive recorder ensembles. And I absolutely loved that. And then in primary school, I heard that they were starting a recorder program. And the music teacher had invited certain kids to join the program. I actually wasn't on the program. I wasn't invited to join. And I went and asked and begged if I could join, and she said yes. And we later became very, very good friends. And I taught for her when she took some time off. And so my love of the recorder was really where it all started. I still, if I just want to relax and enjoy my music, I will just go and play the recorder. So I taught my kids the recorder before they went on to the instruments that they play. And yes, as I say, there was a flute teacher at our school. I'm fortunate in that my younger daughter, who is a phenomenal recorder player, her bandmaster needed an oboe player in the band, and I put an oboe in her hand, and I now live vicariously through her. She's a professional oboe player in Switzerland. And yeah, still love the oboe, I have to say. I love the flute, make no mistake. You know, I wouldn't have pursued it and taken it as far as I've taken it if I if I didn't love it.
Oh, no. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
suppose it goes without saying. But look, becoming an orchestra player is one of the benchmarks of success in the musical field. You played for the Cape Town Symphony Orchestra. That's pretty kind of competitive. Would you mind telling me about the journey of getting there?
Yeah, so look, things are very different today to what they were back then. So you know, my daughter, when she goes to an oboe audition, there are 40 to 45 people from around the world auditioning for one position. Um, I was very fortunate in that when I was at school, my school music teacher's husband was the flute player in the orchestra. And so I had an in there. And then when the second flute player in the Cape Town Symphony Orchestra went on maternity leave, I was asked if I would come and play. So very different scenario to look. I don't think I could pass an audition now. In fact, I know I couldn't pass an audition now. It's such a different beast. Just the skill of auditioning is something, it's so different to actually playing. Like it's a moment in time where you have to be absolutely exact. And then there's no orchestra to support you. You're just playing this excerpt and you play 20 excerpts back to back and then you walk out of the room and it's usually behind a screen. So you've got no feedback. So it really is a very, very different game to actually playing in the orchestra. But yes, I was fortunate to play in the Cape Town Symphony Orchestra for 2 years while the other player was on maternity leave. And then immigrated to New Zealand and played in the New Zealand Philharmonic. Again, it was just a case of putting yourself out there and people getting to know you. And eventually the work sort of starts to come in.
Mm.
That's how I did it, how I did it. But as I say, I don't think I could pass an audition today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll get rusty. Look, you've toured a bit playing the flute around the world. You've got to have some funny slash cool slash embarrassing. Come on, you can't.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been
Look,
hanging.
I probably the one that comes to mind is I was playing in a concert in Namibia in Southwest Africa, and I was playing a solo. It was a Doppler, concertante or something for solo flute with orchestra, and I got to the cadenza, and I had used sticky tape to stick all the pages together and I put it out across the stand. And I kind of like moved across the stage as I moved through the pages. And I was playing the cadenza. And I don't know what happened, but the whole piece of sheet music just did this and floated off the music stand and sort of like floated off the stage and landed on the floor. And it was that moment of horror because I'd never played the piece from memory before. So I didn't know if I could do it or not. But, I think adrenaline kicked in, muscle memory kicked in, and I got through it. Um, but the sad part was that afterwards, at the reception, all anyone could talk about was how I handled my music floating off the stand. And no one said anything about my performance, which I practiced for months. So that was a standout, yeah.
Look,
I
okay,
do
so
remember I had a lot of caviar and wine after that performance.
everyone's feeling to, hey, nice work, mate. Like big high fives and the thumbs up going on there. That's so cool. So, I mean, obviously, yeah, that's something that's taught you is, resilience and being able to kind of like push through. But besides those things, like, what has teaching the flute taught you about yourself, and the human condition and technique and these kind of things about who we are and what we are as people?
Yeah. So Joseph Joubert has a wonderful saying, to teach is to learn twice over. And, I taught the whole afternoon before I came on to this interview. And I'm just always aware at how much I learn from students. And there's always something to learn. There's often a different way to do something from the way that you've learned to do something. And I think one of the wonderful things about teaching is that the very things that you have struggled with as a musician are the things that you become really good at teaching. So sometimes the most phenomenal musicians are not the best teachers. Say for instance, you don't say for instance, oral is not your best uh, feature as a musician. Um,
Happy
by
Hanukkah
teaching
and
oral and by understanding what you struggled with it, you
Happy
are
New
then
Year.
better equipped to teach
Tonight's
somebody
interview.
else. So I guess the only way that I can really put this concise is to say the things that you struggle with as a musician are the things that you have to analyze and work at the most. And so you're best able to pass on that information. Where the things that just come easily to you, you don't think about.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's not always easy to teach those concepts.
Yeah. You don't you can't help people struggle through something that you've never struggled through.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
That
and so I've learned so much from students.
Hmm.
And I continue to learn.
Look, could you tell us about the Australian Flute Festival?
Yeah. So when I initially came to Australia, um, Australia has many different flute societies. So we'd have a Sydney Flute Society, we had an Adelaide Flute Society, Melbourne Flute Society, and we had one umbrella that operated as one society that operated as an umbrella called the Australian Flute Society. And what used to happen is that different states would put on a convention, a flute convention, but it would be like reinventing the wheel every time. So my husband and I decided to start the Australian Flute Festival. And well, actually it started off as the Sydney Flute Festival, but the Sydney and our logo was the Sydney Opera House. And the Sydney Opera House wanted to charge us rights for using Sydney Opera House. So we changed our logo and decided to call it Australian Flute Festival, which was the best thing that we could have done, actually. And we basically took the festival to different states. So it was a 4-day festival that consisted of concerts, of master classes, of people talking about their PhD studies. We had piccolo competitions, we had flute competitions, we had big flutes, and we used to bring over 3 international artists from around the world, and then we'd have so 3 like really, really famous flute players, and then we'd have about 33 other people, flutists, contributing to the festival, doing all kinds of things. And it started off, I think our very first one that we did in 2006 had about 100 people attend. And by the time I stopped doing it in 2019, we'd have over 600 people attending.
Wow.
That's besides our artists. And it became an international festival. It was one of the most incredible things I've done in my life. I have met the most wonderful flute players, and just being able to bring them over to Australia so that other people can hear them. People like, if you want to hear a fantastic flute player, go and listen to Dennis Buryakov. He is amazing. And we brought him over to Australia a few times. People like Marianne Gadigian, Michael Cox, Lorna McGee. I used to get such a thrill by having them in the conservatoire recital hall and just sitting and going, I'm responsible for bringing that person here and for making this happen. It was an enormous thrill for me, and I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have done that. I did it for 15 years. I think we had 8 festivals in the end because we did it every second year. It got too big to have annually. So
Yeah. Kudos to you. That's the
it was amazing. I would never have thought, I grew up in South Africa. I grew up in apartheid. Everyone was boycotting South Africa. And then to find myself in Australia and actually being in the same room as some of these people was just incredible.
words of wisdom or, things that you want to impart onto the listeners of Northern Vibe?
Well, perhaps if I can just give you some encouragement. There've been dark seasons in my life. One particular one is when my daughter had a really horrendous experience, and it was pretty sad for about 2 years while she came to terms with her situation, and while we came to terms with her situation. And she is a beautiful Christian, and I found myself really angry with God. I didn't lose my faith, but I kept on saying, why, God, why? Why her? She's such a beautiful Christian person, and this pain and suffering that she's had to endure, why? And for 2 years, it was hard going. But her faith really strengthened my faith. I have to say, God had a most incredible plan for her life that we didn't know about at the time. And I look back and I just see how God carried her in the palm of his hand. And I just want to encourage people who are going through a dark time or a dark season in their life that God does not desert them, that they are not alone, and that God has a plan. And just encourage people to stick with their faith and to keep praying and to keep walking with Jesus, because he's got you and he's got a plan for your life.
Woman of real faith, and I found that very, very moving towards the end, I must say. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciating the likes and shares. Lisa, always great to hear from you, and the other people as well. Got some fantastic interviews coming up, and releasing some of the edits on YouTube. So make sure you go and check out the YouTube site. Please like, please subscribe. Need those comments. Keep them coming. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys all next week.